this video, we will be replacing the rear brake pads and rear calipers in this 2001 Ford F150. Yesterday I had my brake pedal go all the way to the floor. I pushed it several times and it firmed back up. As I drove the vehicle, I could hear a light grinding noise. I have installed wheel chocks and raised the vehicle just until the rear wheels rotate, and then installed safety stands. And then I can go ahead and remove the wheel. Taking a look at our wheel assembly, we're looking for anything that looks unusual. And what I can see is that on the back side of the rotor, it looks like one of the brake pads has separated from the backing plate and got lodged in there. This is more than likely what was causing the grinding noise, as well as the brake pedal sinking to the floor. Taking a look back at our wheel assembly, we will be replacing the brake pads. We're going to go ahead and replace the calipers as well, because they are about 20 years old. Because we're replacing the brake pads, we're going to have the rotor turned down. These rotors were put on about 5 years ago, along with the pads. Underneath, we're going to inspect our parking brake to make sure that it looks good, as well as cleaning everything. If we take a little closer look at our caliper, we have two caliper bolts that need to be removed. And although this was removed 5 years ago, there is a chance they are corroded. So I will be using some Amsoil's metal protector as a penetrating oil to help loosen up these bolts so I don't risk breaking them. After Amsoil metal protector has soaked in, I can use a 10mm combination wrench to remove the caliper bolts. And using a flathead screwdriver, I can work off that caliper. Now that our caliper has been removed, we need to remove our rotor. To do this, we're going to start by hitting the front of it with a soft face hammer. More than likely, we will need to adjust the parking brake, but I'm first going to see if it'll come off by itself. To aid in this process, I'm going to apply a little bit of Amsoil's metal protector to each of the wheel studs and along the center hub. Because that is securely on there, we're going to adjust the star wheel on the back side. Taking a look from the back side of the wheel assembly, I can see a dust boot located towards the base. We need to remove the dust boot, which will give us access to our adjusting star wheel. If we take a look inside of the area that we removed that dust boot from, we can see that there is a little wheel with teeth. That is the star wheel adjuster, and we need to rotate this to release the parking brake. Now they do make specialty tools for this. but a lot of times you can do this with a flathead screwdriver. Taking a look at the back side of the wheel assembly, we want to rotate the star wheel down. So we're going to come in at a higher angle with a screwdriver or a specialty tool, and we're going to be rolling that towards the concrete as you're looking from the back of the wheel assembly. So after working on this for about a half an hour, the rotor is now loose enough that we can wiggle it off around those parking brake shoes. Using Amsoil's brake and parts cleaner, we can clean all of the parking brake components and the wheel assembly and get a better idea of the condition of the parking brake. The shoes on the parking brake still seem to be in good condition. At this point, we will just clean everything and not replace the parking brake components. I took the rotors into the auto parts store to get turned down, and while those are being turned down, we're going to shift our focus to the caliper. This caliper is about 20 years old, and since we're swapping parts out on this braking system, we're going to go ahead and install new calipers. There is a difference between the left and right calipers. We are working on the passenger side portion of the vehicle, and this is classified as the right caliper. We can put these up next to each other, and you can tell by the bleed screw if you are installing the correct one or not. It should be oriented on the same side as the original. Using Amsoil's metal protector, I can apply a little bit of this penetrating oil to help loosen this bolt, and we're going to let that soak in for a while. I've applied a C-clamp to help hold the caliper in place, attaching it to my leaf spring. I can then take a 14mm wrench and loosen Now there will be brake fluid that drips out, so we'll want to have a drip pan underneath it. We can then grab our new caliper, double checking to make sure that it is for the correct side. Remove our bolt and our two brass washers. We need to put one of our brass washers on first, then slip on our brake line, followed by our other brass washer. And then we can connect that up and tighten that down. And because we did open our braking system, we will need to bleed the brakes at the end. I like to then just position it in place to make sure that everything is installed correctly, the line doesn't kink, and it looks like it'll go back together correctly. I'll also clean off the brake line of any brake fluid for a couple reasons. Number one, we don't want brake fluid sitting on there because it will eat through the finish. But number two, we can watch it as we continue the repair and make sure that no brake fluid is oozing or dripping out. If it is, that means we didn't install it correctly. While I'm waiting for my rotors to be turned down, I'm going to remove the brake parts hardware and clean up all of the various components so that when I get those rotors, I'm ready to put everything back together. I'll be using Amsoil's brake and parts cleaner, as well as a wire brush to help clean off all of the surfaces where my hardware components will go. I'm also going to save my dust boot, as the new caliper does not come with one. My new caliper did come with new caliper bolts and brake hardware, so we're going to go ahead and install that brake hardware, and then we should be ready for our rotor when they finish that and putting our new pads on. Prior to installing the rotor, I'm going to be cleaning the front and the back with Amsoil's brake and parts cleaner. Now that we got our rotors back, we can slide our rotor on over our parking brake. I'm going to install 2 lug nuts across from each other. And when I rotate this, there should be virtually no drag. You can hear just a little tiny bit. We want to adjust that star wheel so that there is just ever so slightly a bit of drag. So I'm going to adjust this so there's just a little bit more. And if you listen real close, there is just a faint drag. And before putting the brake pads on, I like to clean it again. Now, since our caliper is brand new, we do not need to depress the piston. We can go ahead and just install the brake pads. Now, as you install the brake pads, you do want to make note that the double finger side, or the side with the slot and the 2 notches, those need to be on the same side. If you take a look at the other side of those brake pads, there is only 1 finger or 1 notch. Those need to line up so that the 1 notch side is on one side and the 2 notch side is on the other side. Otherwise, you'll have some issues when you install the caliper. Our side with the 2 notches will slip in first, and then we'll pivot the top into place. Make sure those caliper guides where the caliper bolts go don't get caught on the mounting bracket. The brake pads should slide relatively easily on that brake hardware. After that, we can install our new caliper bolts. And our rotor should still rotate with just ever so slight amount of drag. Now that my rotor is installed, my brake calipers are installed, and my brake pads are installed, I'm ready to bleed the brakes, because if you remember, we did open up the brake line and we need to suck out any air that may have entered the brake system. My tool of choice for bleeding brakes is the Capri Tools brake bleed system. This is a 1-person operation, which works great for me. Prior to installing the wheel, I'm going to clean everything one more time. Then we can remove any lug nuts that we installed on the rotor. And the last couple things that we want to do is top off our brake fluid master cylinder reservoir. I am using Amsoil's synthetic .3 and 4 brake fluid. We also need to step on the brake pedal multiple times until it becomes firm. By doing this, we are resetting those pistons on the brakes that we just worked on. Then you'll want to double check the master cylinder again, just to make sure we are at that max level. After that, we can take it for a test drive. And when I go to test drive this, I like to step on the brakes pretty hard a couple times right away, just to make sure that everything feels right and sounds right.